All must now be reconstituted, reconstructed, re-begun. To a religion, time does not matter. Relying on its faith in divine protection, Caodaism continues its way, softly but certainly, to accomplish the celestial mission. Future projects. It does not lack ambitions in the domain of realizable projects. To make of Caodaism a religion of state, the national religion of Vietnam. To make of the Caodaist Holy See a center of pilgrimage and tourism, not only for Vietnam and its neighboring countries, but also and especially for the far nations of Europe and America. To extend proselytism in the world and have, at least in the great capitals, meeting places where Caodaist missionaries shall come preaching the love of neighbor and universal brotherhood. To realize these dreams, Caodaism knows that it counts on the sponsorship of the New France, a great friend and a good counselor. Saigon, November 10, 1946, Trang Quang Vinh. What His Excellency Trang Quang Vinh thinks about reincarnation by Caodaism. The law of reincarnation, when one seeks to the sources of wisdom, is at the origin of all religions. Every searcher of truth in the Orient or Occident, every truly religious person, without distinction of belief, must conceive and recognize that that law is unique from an esoteric point of view, and shall always remain so. Whence the certitude of the immortality of the soul, and the evolution of each being after successive existences. Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, in an order to realize religious unity, takes into consideration the pure principles acknowledged as being eternal truths of the four great religions, and practices the broadest tolerance towards all forms of faith, however reserving for itself to bring them back by persuasion to the original unity. Now our doctrine is founded by Spiritism, on the teaching of our Divine Master. It is natural that we should conceive of the reincarnation in the manner of spiritualists of India and the Occident, and take as a fundamental axis the karmic law that was taught of old, the secret seal in the temples of India, Chaldees, and Egypt. It is simple, comprehensible, because for common people and learned persons, truth does not change its form. As the sun that shines for all over the world, the divine law is applied to all the universe, and even imposed upon vegetation and the beasts. It is not the goal of every religious man to reach the wisdom of the soul? Is it not the eternal glory of all spirits to acquire the riches of God's virtue and be rendered immortal? The result is learning to know oneself first, then knowing by conscience the being who must be. To reach this supreme aim, from unclean matter to pure divinity, all vitality, all energy, all being, makes its way tramping through numerous reincarnations. Now, who says reincarnation says suffering? Who says suffering says love? Christ, Buddha, LİCH, and Confucius did not step aside from that way. The truth taught by our Divine Master and conceived by each of those instructors of humanity is always one. They who pretend otherwise are far from truth. They are persons rushing to enjoy a beatitude and perfect rest after the hard terrestrial trial, and who would pass in one bound from our planet to the seventh heaven and nirvana. To those eager for easy paradises, we must recall that great occultists as well as great philosophers who have affirmed successive lives believed that the soul, arrived at perfection, ceases to be reincarnated to live a life of cosmic transcendence. But to reach perfection of the soul is a long journey. The number of stages depends on each spirit. Meanwhile, successive lives are necessary for the extension of sensibility, the development of intelligence, and the exercise of will. This theory is the only one that gives a plausible explanation of the evolution of the soul by uniting it to the law of reincarnation. Such is the law of strict justice, proving the real and infinite kindness of God. His creatures are responsible only for their actions, and the conscience is the severe judge who marks each suffering with a step taken toward evolution. From the preceding statement, it is easy to understand that the reincarnated being does not wholly differ from the terrestrial being, which we might know. Little by little, as it accumulates existences, the spirit creates an individuality that is permanent, constantly keeps on improving it, whatever may be the different bodies that it momentarily animates, and later to be abandoned. The progress of the spirit or the soul increases according to the merit of each life, but the evolution does not prevent the soul, in certain cases, from spontaneously remembering his past lives. Mr. Leon Denis has, on the problem of being and destiny, given precious indications, and God has granted them to give the world proof of the reality of successive existences. In his treatise on Egyptian mystic, Janbeek expresses the following: God's justice is not the justice of men. Man defines justice in relation to his actual life and his present state. God defines it relatively to our successive lives and to the universality of our lives. Thus, the pains that afflict us are often punishments for sin which the soul has committed in a previous life. They who pretend the contrary ill understand the divine justice. As Allan Kardec so justly wrote, we must be born and reborn and ceaselessly progress. Knowledge of this law will enable men to destroy utterly within themselves all selfishness, hate, envy, and pride. It will teach to all the acceptance of suffering for the perfection of the soul, and help those who suffer to understand the reasons for inequalities here below. By placing the divine above the human, it puts at the zenith of the cosmos the key to all problems. Essential elements of Caodaism. According to the teachings of the Supreme Being, the doctrines of the various religions through the centuries have been denatured and badly practiced, even by those who were charged with spreading them. The order and peace of the days of old are effaced. The moral law of humanity is quite betrayed. The world is at present in darkness. A new religion is needed, capable of maintaining humanity in the love of creation and fraternization of all races. The Caodaist doctrine sets itself this heavy task. To the eternal truths, to the divine law, Caodaism conforms its dogmas and principles. It respects others' beliefs when those beliefs are not of a nature to lead humanity to fanaticism and heresy. Where certain truths are deformed by superstitious conceptions of ignorance, the new religion undertakes to re-establish them in their true meaning. The scheme of our great way tends not only to conciliate all religious convictions, but also to adapt itself to all degrees of spiritual evolution. From a moral point of view, our doctrine reminds man of his duties towards himself, his family, society, which is a wider family, and finally, humanity, the universal family. From a philosophical point of view, it preaches disinterestedness towards honors, riches, luxury. In a word, a freeing from the servitude of matter to seek in spirituality the full quietude of the soul. From the point of view of worship, it recommends the adoration of God, the Father of all, the veneration of superior spirits who constitute the august occult hierarchy, and the founders of great religions, true instructors of humanity. From a spiritualistic point of view, it confirms in harmony with other religions and with the systems of spiritualistic and psychological philosophy. the existence of the soul, its survival of the physical body, its evolution by the plurality of existence, the posthumous consequences of human action ordered by the karmic law. From the point of view of the initiate, it communicates to those of the dignitaries who are worthy revealed teachings that shall empower them, by a process of spiritual evolution, to accede to ravishments of beatitude. To evangelize the world and unite all the Master's children, we, his disciples, have only to draw our force and wisdom from his divine teachings. His doctrine is a reformed doctrine, the only one capable of bringing back universal peace, drawn from the fusion of the principal religions of the Orient and of Christianity, and actually spread over much of the terrestrial globe under different forms. With him we shall dissipate everything that is of error and pretension, overthrow all obstacles, and everywhere sow wisdom and love. The spotless truth can come only from him, for all human bodies are subject to error, and no one here below can penetrate his secrets. He is the true Father and Master of humanity, because it is from him that comes all our being. Father, he gives us vitality. Master, he bequeaths us his own divinity. Note: the Buddhist truth on the karmic law is always the same, Gautama Buddha said. The present is the result of the past, which was our work. The future shall bring forth an effect of which the present is the cause. Saigon, November 10, 1946. The delegate of the Superior of Caodaism, TRIòng T. Some words from the Holy See. The newspaper Le Khmer 3537 briefly interviewed His Holiness Pham Tak, Present Superior of Caodaism. Here is the text of the interview. We shall not undertake to revive, in these lines, the show and splendor of the ceremonies marking the inauguration of the Caodaist Temple of Phnom Penh, our colleagues having done it so well. We only aim at examining with our readers, with all impartiality, the declarations that His Holiness Pham Tak, Supreme Chief of the Caodaist religion, so kindly gave us. We were profoundly moved and touched at the welcome we received from this man, by his modesty and by his great simplicity. Our conversation was cordial, friendly, we might say fraternal, for at no time did His Holiness Pham Tak try to pontificate, nor give proof of the least intolerance. He is a very enlightened man. His religious conceptions are no doubt somewhat different from ours, but the ideal pursued is so beautiful that we could only bow before his sincere faith, reminding ourselves of what is sung in all the Christmas songs. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. We shall add that after having seen and heard, we esteem that the Caodaists are truly men of goodwill. To a question we asked him on the subject of the doctrine exposed in the pamphlet, graciously handed to all visitors, expressed thus: without being polytheist in fact, it is so in principle, for besides the official adoration of the Supreme God, it allows its believers the free veneration of other gods who have conquered their hearts. In effect, we remarked to His Holiness Pham Tak that in all the revelations made to men on the subject of the divinity, it was an acknowledged fact, even to the occultists, that there was only one God, in three persons, called by the appellation of Divine Triad. That's right, replied His Holiness Pham Tak, but for us, God is the incommensurable, the eternal, the Most High, the Absolute. He has no name. In our religion, the word gods that has shocked you has not the heathen meaning you lend it. It simply designates spirits completely detached from matter and approaching the Most High as near as possible. They are, in a way, saints. The names of our Eternal are given Him by every people and under different forms. These different names separate humanity instead of uniting them. That is why we don't call him God, but the Most High, the Absolute, the Eternal. To another question concerning Christ, the answer was also categorical. We don't seek to destroy Christ's doctrine. We come, on the contrary, to strengthen it, for it is impossible to deny the existence of Christ. Our efforts aim at preparing by spirituality the regeneration of the whole of humanity, which seems to have forgotten all the maxims of Christ, which, if they had followed, should have kept peace in the world. Caodaism is the bridge cast over the deep chasm that seemed impassable, separating Christ from Buddha, who was his precursor. The harmony of whose doctrines, completing one another, is necessary to the union of the Occidental and Asiatic peoples, that fraternity may reign between them. We could only bow before so wise a saying, which, furthermore, corresponds to that of Christ. I am not come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. It is moreover strange to find that in recent years, in the whole world, the number of men who take an interest in the Holy Scriptures increases steadily. This need of belief is typical, and is for us the tangible proof that the time foretold by Daniel in St. John, when Christ is going to return to the earth to give to each his due, is near. So we can only rejoice in the work undertaken by Caodaism, that of bringing back to Christ, by a necessary transition, the lost sheep of the Far East, in order that, according to St. John, one shepherd and one flock. There shall be but one shepherd and one flock. Le Populaire d'Indochine 12-11-36 also had an interview with the superior of Caodaism under circumstances as follows. A crowd estimated at some 20,000 persons occupies the alleys, the gardens, and the woods of Dít since yesterday. They have come from all parts of Cochin China, some by boats, others by cart. They camp in the open air, men and women, seated on mats, near the big oxen that have brought them here. Dít is in holiday. Dít is celebrating the end of mourning for the late Pope LαϊκH. On the square of universal fraternity, which is illuminated by the garish light of the sweltering sun, a big altar has been erected to the memory of the former chief of Caodaism. On this altar is stretched an immense cloth representing Mr. LαϊκH with his sacerdotal trappings. From both sides of the gigantic esplanade, which is the place of fraternity, are lined up, province by province, the delegations from the interior with their chiefs, banners, and oriflammes. A new rule established only since Mr. LαϊκH's death reduced the period of mourning to 20 months instead of 24. But for Mr. LαϊκH, the old rule was maintained. While awaiting the great night festival, we went to pay a visit to Mr. LαϊκH's successor, Mr. FANPAGE, in his small villa at the very end of the alley TRIionP. Mr. FANPAGE welcomed us with the delicate courtesy for which he is well known. He gracefully answered all our questions. Have you come into communication with Mr. LαϊκH's spirit? Yes, many times. By yourself or through a medium? Through a medium, though I am a medium myself, and could make direct contact with the late Pope's spirit. What recommendations did he make? To do our best to open our religion to all faiths, all beliefs, in broad spirit of tolerance, to destroy the materialist error wherever we shall meet it. Tell us of the work of propaganda of Caodaism abroad. It is not an easy work, for it is not proper to wound the susceptibilities of the nations to which we come. For our propaganda in China, the members of the mission are already named, but they are at present finishing their cultural formation in the seminary. How many Caodai seminaries are there? 2, one at Dít, the other at Phnom Penh. The government has suggested that we discontinue them, but that is not possible, for we must form true priests. Have you any Frenchmen in your religion? Oh yes, many Frenchmen are beginning to learn our religion by correspondence. In France, Mrs. Félicien Chalet bears the executive powers with the title of Gaosu, that is, bishop, while Mr. Gabriel Gobron carries the legislative powers with the title of Dít N.ĐèO, instructor. What is the actual number of followers of Caodaism? At one time, the schism of Bentre did our religion an injury, which saw numerous faithful turn away from it. But now we have reached 9/10 of the number of followers we had at the moment of the greatest extension of Caodaism. The figure is more than 1 million. In Tonkin we have between 6,000 and 7,000 faithful. With these words we take leave of Mr. FANPAGE, because many other callers wish to talk with the Pope. From 7 o'clock in the evening on, the gardens of TRIionare illuminated by thousands of Chinese lanterns, while paper images representing Junai are illuminated by soft lights. A spotless moon gives the ceremony a somewhat unreal character. 10,000 of the faithful already occupy the spots reserved to them in the parade of the great procession. And one cannot deny that a certain mysticism emanates from that quiet, moon-white train, from that endless parade under big trees that not the least breeze stirs, nor the least cry disturbs. Caodaism, among its other adversaries, has also met certain spiritualists, in spite of its origin of spiritualistic practices, at least in the qualified sacerdocy. It seems that Spiritism is a new wine that bursts old bottles. A mass of followers, having understood nothing of the explosion of Spiritism in our ultra-modern world, have squabbled and disputed with one another to know whether it is a philosophy, a science, a religion, without knowing, or without wishing to know, that it is all these at the same time, and does not bear that artificial compartmentalizing of pedants and illiterates. We then have religious, spiritualistic countries, Great Britain, Brazil, etc., and scientific spiritualistic countries, France, Italy, Cuba, Argentina, etc. Better, in the same country, we find groups with a religious tendency, Christic Spiritism in England, France, etc., in associations with a scientific tendency, Reup Spirit in Paris, Reup Spirit Belge in LİCH, etc. Scientific spiritualists in general are hostile to Caodaism, for which they reproach for its ceremonies, rites, sacerdocy, catechisms, and at the slightest provocation, those good apostles would excommunicate it without a trial. I know what I say in writing these painful observations. They would have in Asia more Voltairean than Voltaire. Such ignorance is not encouraging. Mr. FANPAGE, Superior of Caodaism, wrote to me on the 25th of March, 1935, from the Holy See at TRIionT, Cochin, China. A letter that I published not for the flattering appreciations it contains about me. Perhaps you will believe me if I confess this. I've not yet come to work impersonally, anonymously, as every advanced initiate ought to work for social service, but I have come to an absolute indifference before praises and blame expressed about my work and me, but for certain teachings, for certain precisions which it contains. My dear brother, our brother Mr. Vin has shared with me all your letters, as well as your articles appearing in various reviews. Allow me to thank you with all my heart for busying yourself with the new doctrine, with such a noble self-sacrifice. Our Divine Master holds you in great consideration, and we pray that He may give you better health to be able to continue, without interruption, the work you have so well undertaken. This very evening I am going to conduct divine service and present to that end a petition to our Divine Master. do believe that I have been very sorry to hear that you are suffering, and that from time to time illness confines you to your bed. You must be well to work. Man has but few years to live on this earth of trials, and time is precious to him, very precious, when he knows how to use it. Humanity lives in suffering. It is our duty to seek, by all means, if not to end these sufferings, at least to relieve them. So long as we draw a breath of life, let us work. Always work for the regeneration of man, his perfection, the fraternization of races, the universal peace that so much promised and so little realized peace. Thanks to your unwearying activity that you have made known the new doctrine in numerous spots of various countries. I beg you to persevere in your task, for I am firmly convinced that one day soon your efforts shall be crowned with success. I am sure that our Divine Master and numerous spirits watch over you and inspire you marvelously. Always keep in close and regular relations with spiritualistic circles, and help their members understand that by divine will, we, Cochin Chinese, have but a little mission that limits itself to the creation of a sacerdocy to whom we inculcate a faith, a great faith in God, and it needs the gathering of all spiritualistic messengers of the whole world to prepare the new gospel, capable of renovating the world in the way of truth, in order that man may walk no more in darkness, and that he may know where he comes from, what he is doing in the present life, and what he will become after death. You are very specially named for that great task. God made you a polyglot for that purpose. You have that great advantage over all of us here, who, besides our mother tongue, speak and write French, but imperfectly. I know that spiritualists have among them immutable principles. They do not want religion nor cumbersome rites. It will be very difficult to make them admit our ideas and accept our new faith, but I have confidence that God and the spirits will help you in this difficult task, and when the time comes, their great master, Allan Kardec, will manifest himself to bring them back towards us. The spirit Victor Hugo, under the pseudonym Symbol, has sent them several messages. On the other hand, Brother Francois of Phnom Penh has shared with me his answer to Brother Henri Francois of France. I fully approve of its terms. I am pleased to quote, intellectuals, scholars, are generally carried to extremes. They are either atheists or believers, sometimes to the point of intolerance, not to say fanaticism. Let us follow in the golden mean, as the sage Confucius recommends. Here enclosed is the translation of a message our brother Cao Deit and I have obtained from Victor Hugo's spirit concerning dignitaries of Dai. Please read the explanations given on this subject to Brother Henri Francois by his namesake of Cambodia. I think that you have been solicited by many persons as to how we shall succeed in unifying all religions which, by their principles, dogmas, rites, beliefs, etc., are so clearly different, even opposing and contradicting one another, not to say posing as adversaries. We might answer by these few sentences, which, in my opinion, explain the question quite clearly, in spite of being somewhat laconic. Let us consider religions as departments of university. To be admitted into one of these departments, a student must first have his BA, a key giving him access to the university of his choice. To have his diploma, a student must pass through the primary and elementary classes and so on, where he must acquire a sufficient range of diverse, even heterogeneous knowledge. To form a university, there must be several departments. Each department has its particular teaching, but all must be under one leadership, a president. Broad acquired knowledges will always be useful to the student in the future, and give him the stamp of a learned man. In the department of his choice, he must improve the studies of his choice, but the others already acquired are not useless at all. An engineer is versed in mathematics, a physician anatomy, a lawyer must be schooled in the law. But each of them has to know, in addition, letters, figures, a little of other matters, always necessary in life. In spite of their particular knowledge, their professions, they cannot live outside society. So, society reunites them after their graduation. Moreover, the engineer cannot get along without the physician, nor the physician without the engineer. It is the same with religions. A layman must have acquired some principles of morals, some notions of philosophy, etc., to be well thought of, and not be expelled from society. He thus prepares himself for entry into a religion to his taste. Religions are like university departments. Superficially, their dogmas, beliefs, etc., seem to be out of harmony with one another. They often are in opposition. They must be so, for each one has a taste, a tendency, a desire, an instruction, an education completely different of that of his neighbor. Religions were differently created because of the stage of civilization of peoples, the degree of evolution, the atmosphere, place of their birth, their manners and customs, etc. But above all these things, seeming so diverse, there is the Creator, God, the universal conscience who unites all men in spite of the diverse colors of their skin, their degree of civilization, etc. It belongs to the Caodaists to place themselves at the service of the great faith in God, for that union will put an end to the terrible nightmare, fratricidal world war, by which men are obsessed, and which is even now being prepared so actively in Europe. Dogmas and sectarianism confine men to a very reduced circle, where he sees only too small a part of the solar world that enlightens him. He must evolve, so he must seek to know, to progress, in order not to mark time. Religion must not be for him like a cord that encircles a child who already knows how to walk, but whose nurse, obtuse or unreasonably fearful of her responsibility, still holds strongly in her hands, under the pretext that the child may lose his balance and fall. Present humanity is pretty a big child, to be held in leash and prevented longer from marching toward the sublime. He needs the open air of the infinite to be in conformity with the state of his soul and his devotion. He ought to be able to act and live in truth, not darkness, or obsessed and obsessing doubt. Hoping to hear from you soon, I leave you with a hearty embrace, begging God to cover you with his benediction and graces, and asking you to give my best regards to our dear sister, Madame Gabriel Gobron. FANPAGE, Superior of Caodaism, Holy See at TNN. As you can see, it is to the contributor to the Revue Spirit Paris, as well as the Caodaist instructor, that His Holiness speaks. Though we have suffered disagreeable rebuffs in certain spiritualistic circles, we must heartily thank our friend, Mr. Hubert Forestier, Editor-in-Chief of the Revue Spirit, who has never made any objection to the insertion of a paper designed to establish confidence in the brethren of Vietnam, helping them to emerge from their martyrdom. On the contrary, he has always been happy to intervene on their behalf, especially to facilitate my task in certain international spiritualistic congresses, Barcelona, 1934, Glasgow, 1937, and give the widest publicity to certain documents in favor of Caodaism. In theosophical circles, the same understanding in general, in spite of certain anti-Caodaist elements, incapable of revising a once crystallized judgment, and which have influenced other theosophists. Conclusion. In the service of Caodaism. I have given much of my life to Caodaism. I have shared its pain, its sorrows, its discouragements, at tragic times when doctors of philosophy and sons of hate were bullying it and persecuting it in hundreds of cynic, hypocritical ways. I have lived its joys, its hopes, its triumph, at happy moments when knights of the spirit and men of goodwill were granting it a truce or recognizing its right to more justice. In spite of precarious health, I have made these sufferings my own. They were sometimes added to my almost daily worries. To the trials of Caodaism were added, in a painful fraternity, my own karmic reparations. After overwhelming, hopeless days, a ray of light has from time to time pierced the cloud, and the sun has swept the Artemis fog. It was my health that once more recovered for a time. It was some newspaper or letter which, by air or sea mail, brought from Indochina joyous news which made me exult. For 13 years I have thus lived the life of my brethren of Vietnam, making it one with my own. I have regretted 1,000 times having no more spiritual power, useful relations, talent, and lucidity, in order to help them better in their constructive efforts as well as in their silent distresses. I would do much for them, and I feel in all humility that I have done very little. Forgive me, my good, my kind Vietnamese brethren, for having been so little the instructor in France that you solemnly named, for having been only the humble follower you familiarly call Brother Gago.